And good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to another awesome edition here at CEO Effectiveness, where we're going to dive into a 15-minute mastery discussion with world-renowned Dr. Bill Anton and founder of CEO Effectiveness. Dr. Anton, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm well.
Oh,
I'm
good,
well.
good,
I'm well.
good.
Excited about today's topic because this is one that truly is near and dear to so many people in the business world, in the entrepreneur world. And you know, we're thinking about management and what management is and
Check it out.
how to best do it, right? And how to, it's one thing to go out there, gather the talent, have a phenomenal team, have high performing individuals. But, you know, when we start talking about the consistency factor over time, how to manage the processes, the culture, the engagement. So I'm really excited about our time today and diving in. So, you know, I think a good place for us to start is, you know, when you think of management, Dr. Anton, and all the different folks over your 35-year career that you have helped and worked with, what is some of the big things they need to know about being an effective manager?
I think one of the really important things is that your behavior has an impact on other people. And often what you think you're trying to accomplish, or how you think you're relating to people, or how you're trying to achieve results through others, may not necessarily be what others are experiencing. So really good management, like good leadership, requires empathy. And empathy requires the capacity to see yourself objectively, or what I like to call personal mastery.
So that's interesting, right? So the idea of the other, right? We're managing other people, right? And so being able to understand other people, we are managing, having that empathy to understand where they're coming from, being able to relate to them, right? Which kind of resonates with culture, right? I mean, what's the culture, the company culture that has been established? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I like to think of culture as sort of like the ecosystem of the rainforest. That culture is really induced from all of the competing resources that exist in the forest, and it provides an overlay to the forest that allows the strongest in each particular entity to thrive. And so in some ways, a culture is a reflection of the people in the organization and how the people function, how free they are to be themselves, to be creative, and to produce is a function, I think, of management self-knowledge.
Very interesting. So management self-knowledge. So when we're thinking about culture in and of itself, is it the type of thing where, you know, we think about company mission, company values, does it have to be constantly reinforced? Or is it more of kind of a silent understanding that an expectation of sorts that we have of our employees that we don't necessarily have a lot of touch points on, right? But we expect them to just, you should know that.
Yeah, I think a good culture starts off with values, core values. And core values, like culture, should be induced. Like you should, for example, not have I'm just reading a particular book, which I won't mention, that talked about how to create a vision. And it talked about the leader coming up with a vision and then sharing it with the group. I'd rather start with the group and start with what's important to each member of the group, and then sort of, again, induce it. Find the common denominators among the whole group, and then see how you can create core values around what everyone is willing to devote their heart and soul for, and then those become the core values of the organization. Now, what often happens is, as an organization grows and develops, then you'll be bringing people in. You're going to be maybe moving people around. Like, you want to make sure you have the right person in the right position. And as companies grow, you could have the right CFO, for example, in the right position. As the company grows, you might have the right person in the wrong position.
Absolutely.
But what you know is that CFO and other members of the organization are really tied together by core values that reflect not only what the company believes in, but what they believe in. And it aligns what they believe in with what the company's destination is. So it's really a way of creating a system where there's a lot of signal and very little noise, and a lot of transactions, a lot of processes, but very little friction inhibiting the seamless flow of the processes. And it starts with the person.
Wow. So culture is is very much important in the sense of when we're thinking about replicating what it is that we want to see, that the core values, right, in our people, being able to understand what's making them tick, what they believe in, that they can then in turn contribute to the growth of the company and push the mission forward.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You really can never abandon your core values. And if you bring new people in, I think you have to go through a period of assessment with the new people to see if they really incarnate the core values, if they are core values that they can believe and fully commit themselves not to undermine. If that isn't the case, then often that isn't the right person for your organization. And it's better to find out early than later.
Now, there's some best practices for that to kind of find out sooner than later.
I think so. I think it's useful. I think it's useful to do an assessment on new people. Like I like using five-factor theory. I think in particular, two of the really important dimensions, and to have my good friend, Dr. Bob Smith, who is the publisher of the NEO, to offer me that great advice. The really important dimensions to look at on that on those five factors are really the ability to be agreeable, that is to work with other people, and the ability to really be committed to your work, to be conscientious, and all of the dimensions of agreeableness and conscientiousness. And then the next one would be intelligence. But in some positions, you can sort of take intelligence for granted. Like if you're running a CPA firm and you're hiring CPAs, you have a fair likelihood that you're going to be correct, that you're dealing with an intelligent group of people.
Certainly.
Same with physicians and other kinds of groups, but there are exceptions.
No, that makes total sense, right? So the idea that culture is collective, it's a group effort, right? And to be able to kind of sift out, to find out earlier, sooner than later, if someone's going to fit in with that culture that is kind of making the company move forward in progress and growth.
Yeah, and culture is kind of the common denominator of all of the individual differences in an organization, and something that everyone can freely commit their energy, their time, and their creativity to.
That makes a lot of sense. So now kind of moving forward, outside of our people and our culture, right? Structure matters, right? And so can you kind of elaborate a little bit as to why is structure important?
Yeah. Well, because I think that the architecture of the organization decides or determines what the organization is capable of. One structure I love is the concept of a learning organization, in which you really only have to master 5 disciplines, but those 5 disciplines touch on everything we've touched on today plus more.
Yeah.
And they really start off with a shared vision, again, which is induced from your core values. Personal mastery is absolutely critical. For example, personal mastery is the ability to objectify your thoughts, to be able to see reality as reality, not as a projection of what you believe that may or not be accurate. Then mental models, I talk about, I think in both of the books I've written, mental models are things that you often are unaware of in yourself, but they're generally self-limiting beliefs. And team learning, the 4th discipline, is really how you interact with others in the team. And the way I like to think about it is that love or I-thou relationships are seeing the existence of the other per se, seeing people as a separate entity with their own history, their own ideas, just as you are, and not giving a lot of priority to your thoughts and ideas, but listening to others. And then the 5th discipline is called systems thinking, which is recognizing, again, the rainforest concept, that how all these things interact is a system. And one of the qualities of a system is that if you change any component of a system, you affect the entire system.
Absolutely.
So that's the kind of a learning organization structure, I think, is the most viable for an organization, particularly in the 21st century.
So when we think about having some very high performing people, right, that work in our organization, always on their A game, always top performers, always hit their numbers, doing what they need to do, is there anything in particular when we're thinking about having an organization that's based off of learning, what we can do to help them continue to push forward and motivate themselves?
Yeah. Well, I believe that commitment to a relationship or an organization is a function of the potential for your own personal growth. So an organization that is committed to the personal growth and development of everyone in it and sees everyone in it as a unique child of God, so to speak, equal to yourself, and you only differ from them by virtue of position and some of the accidents of birth. And if you have that perspective along with the capability and a knowledge base, I think that you can provide the kind of organization in which people will stay committed, in which they'll actually be excited to come to work, in which they'll offer their best. Because a person who is in the presence of a mature a person who has outgrown their early mental models and is really capable of being adaptive, when you're in the presence of that kind of resonant leader, your mirror neurons are stimulated and you're free to be your complete self, which means the organization gets the very best of you, not the parts that you would hold back if you were constrained by the other.
And that's exactly what all of us want, right?
Yeah.
Business owners, anyone who is in a C-suite or a top administrative position, you want engagement, you want commitment, you need that because you want your team to thrive, right? And so, and so kind of bringing it full circle, right? So engagement and commitment, are there any best practices as far as getting folks to engage, right? Let's say we have, an employee or two who don't happen to be as engaged as we would like them to be, right? Well, what are some things that you think that we can do to help get them more engaged and committed to the organization?
Well, there's the concept of followership, and that really means that I have a responsibility to communicate to my boss or my whoever I report to what the conditions are that I work best under. And I think humorously about a situation when I was at the university and we had a new vice president come into the organization. And in one of our early meetings, he asked me, I was a direct reporter. He wanted me to be a direct report. He asked me how often I thought we should meet. And my response was once every 5 years. Well, the reason for, even though it's a humorous response and one that in retrospect was rather naive, but what I was really telling him is once I know what the job is, like I'm going to be ahead of you. You're not going to have to be assigning me a whole lot.
Right.
I'm going to give you 100% because that's how I function best. And I also think fondly of my father-in-law who used to own racehorses, and he did something that almost none of the other people at the track did. He would take his racehorses out when they weren't racing to a field so they could run and be free.
Right.
And as a consequence of that, he actually had one year the national champion. And so he didn't leave the horse in the stall when they weren't racing.
Yeah.
They were out being horses.
Absolutely.
And they paid him back very, very nicely.
They were in their natural state.
And he realized what they needed to give their best on the track.
Right.
They needed to be free. And some of the big stables would keep their horses in the stalls 24/7.
Sure, sure.
They'd take them out, exercise them around the track, and then back in the stall.
Wow.
And that really made a difference.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. And so, and I know we're coming close to our time, but one quick thing, we live in a day and age, it's digital everything, right? And there's so many workforces that are out there now that work remote, right? And so for the folks out there who own companies, who have employees who do work remote, from a management perspective, we're talking about things like engagement, commitment, structure, culture. Are there any best practices for folks who have employees who work remote that you would push forward?
Well, again, the person may work remote, but I would recommend that you not hire remote. And so I would recommend that you meet with a person, that you do assessment, that you get, particularly, we're dealing with a company now who has an issue with remote employees, that they hire people on the basis of skill sets and success in prior jobs, and then they go to a remote location. And what they've found is that a lot of these people sort of lose the steam and find other things to do other than the job, and that they're not really accomplishing autonomously what you would hope that they would. And so I would say one of the variables that we would test for there are conscientiousness and in particular dutifulness.
Absolutely.
And if a person has those qualities, no matter where they are, they're going to give you the best, not because of who you are, but because of who they are.
Wow, that's profound, very profound. Well, we're coming to a close here, and I know Dr. Anton, with both books that you have published, there's one in particular where I know you speak to management quite a bit, right? And so everyone out there tuning in, so business success, right? So if you go to our website, ceoeffectiveness.com, you will see where you can find a direct link to Amazon, where you can purchase this book and dive into a lot more detail and facets of management, key components that you need to be successful in managing and growing your team. So as a quick recap, so when we're thinking about management, so first and foremost, right, have a very clear grasp and understanding of your people and your culture, right? And number two, having a deep dive and very clear transparency on structure, right?
Mhm.
Right. And number three, very important, engagement and commitment, right? And so making sure that things are being done to engage your team, getting them fully committed. And to Dr. Anton's point, it's not yourself that needs to be committed and engaged, it's your employees. And so there's a lot of different tools and things that can be used to identify to make sure that you have the right people on board. Dr. Anton, such a pleasure, sir. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
To all our viewers, thank you very much. CEOeffectiveness.com. We look forward to hearing from you. Have a wonderful weekend.